Nestled in the Puente Hills Reserve near Whittier, California, lies Turnbull Canyon, which is the home to many myths, urban legends, and ghost stories. In today's episode, we will be driving into the canyon, so make sure to buckle up and make sure that your doors are locked. Hey ghoulies, my name is Juan Carlos and I am your afterlife archivist, and this is the Final Queer Files, Episode 1, Turnbull Canyon. In today's episode, we are going to be diving into the history and the hauntings of Turnbull Canyon in Whittier, California. To get ready for this adventure, I have poured a little bit of wine for myself. There's a little wine ASMR for you. It is from Callaway Vineyard, and I love it so much. And I also have my blanket right here. So go ahead and grab yourself a drink. Make sure to get comfy and cozy in your couch or in your bed, wherever you're watching this, because we are going to be talking about some dark things. My story begins where I grew up in Pico Rivera, which is the neighboring city to Whittier, and growing up, I always heard about Turnbull Canyon. My older brother, who's 4 years older, would tell me stories about him and his friends would go up there, and then like there was, I don't know if this was in Turnbull Canyon, but I remember him telling me a story about if you stopped your car at some point, then it would feel as if your car was being pushed against, gravity, even though it was on a hill, and it was off. So he was like, yeah, that was like weird. There's just a lot of really interesting history that is really dark. And so we are going to dive into that. To first start off with the history, we're going to go back to the time when this land was not owned by white settlers, and it was in fact owned by the Tonga people, who owned a big portion of this area that we live in. But specifically, where the canyon is, that was land that was owned by the Tonga people. Of course, the Spanish came, and it is said that the canyon was a place where Spanish colonizers would take indigenous people and unalive them brutally if they did not try to convert to Catholicism, or if they did not comply with what the Spanish colonizers were asking them to do. Already, right off the bat, this canyon has a lot of dark history, especially starting off with that much. It was so dark that the Tonga people have a saying or a name for the canyon. I'm going to put it right here because I'm unable to pronounce it, but it translates to the place of darkness and death. Just let that sit with you. Anyways, continuing on with the story. So, where does Turnbull Canyon get its name from? It actually gets its name from its owner, or previous owner, I should say, Robert Turnbull. Now, this is a very interesting case. Robert Turnbull was a shepherd that came to California because he was tired of shepherding sheep for a living, and he was like, there's got to be more than life. There's got to be more to life than shepherding sheep. And so he came to California around the 1880s to be able to 1880s, 1870s, 1880s to be able to get into real estate. And so he gets into real estate. He starts off in the Los Angeles area. He gets some real estate and tries to, sell off to people and stuff. And then he's able to purchase the land where Turnbull Canyon currently is. So Turnbull gets the land for very cheap, by the way, and he lives on it, and he continues shepherding his sheep there, even though he was like, I'm tired of that. I don't want to shepherd sheep anymore. But he was like, you know what? It's an honest living. And so years go by, and people continuously are wanting to buy this land. They go up to him and there's like, hey, Turnbull, like, how about I get that land from you? And, I'll pay you a really good price. And he's like, nope, I'm not selling the land. And by this time, he is also gaining a reputation of being the town drunk. And it actually leads to his demise. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So Turnbull eventually, in 1888, he sells the land to these two people for a grand sum of $30,000. I wonder what that would be in inflation right now. But I mean, for us, that seems really cheap to buy a whole plot of land with a whole canyon in it. And so he sells the land and he goes on living his life. And then one day, about a year or so later, he is out drinking as he normally is, and he finds himself falling off of his horse, and he is then arrested for public intoxication. I mean, yes, if you're going to be out and about and drinking a whole lot and then trying to drive home with your horse, I mean, even back then, homie, no, that's not what we do. That's not what we do. Drink at home. It's much safer. So he gets arrested, gets thrown in jail. And then when he comes back home the next day, he is beaten up and bloody. And he's not quite sure why. He doesn't know what happened. He doesn't know what's going on. But on his way home, he actually suffers a brain aneurysm. And due to that brain aneurysm, he then falls over the Macy Bridge, which that's what it used to be called. Now it's called the Cesar Chavez Bridge. Interesting fact, Macy Bridge is actually a location near to his very first plot of land that he bought when he came to California. Coincidence? I don't know. And when the coroner was examining Turnbull's body, he saw that he did have a brain aneurysm, but he concluded that the brain aneurysm was due to the fact that he was bludgeoned to the head. And essentially, the coroner deemed that, yes, Turnbull was murdered. Now, the question is, who murdered him? No one knows. No one ever found out. There were no eyewitnesses to how he was beaten up. Still to this day, it is a huge mystery. But because of this, the people in charge of the committee in charge of naming the canyon or whatever, or in charge of the canyon, they decided to name the canyon after him, Turnbull. So that is why Turnbull Canyon is named Turnbull Canyon. Next, what I want to talk about is Flight 416. In April 15, 1952, LAX Tower Control actually loses contact with Flight 416, who is captained by Lewis Powell. And so they are trying to contact him. They're like, hey, like, Captain Powell, like, are you coming in? Where are you? Because their flight was scheduled to land in Inglewood around 3:30 in the morning. But they lost all contact with them. It was radio silence, and they never heard a single peep out of them. Now, around 10 a.m., a rancher is going up, driving around Turnbull Canyon, and he notices smoke billowing up from the canyon. And he was like, what the heck? Like, that's so weird. Why is there smoke? And Then he goes up to higher ground, he climbs, and then he realizes, oh shoot, there's this whole plane crash in the canyon. And it wasn't just like in one spot, the whole plane was scattered in pieces all throughout the canyon. Police came, they started to rummage through everything, and they actually found out that 29 souls were on that plane and had perished upon impact. And there was a lot of speculations as to what happened. So, what they say is that Captain Powell was actually flying 10 feet below the suggested altitude. And that morning was particularly foggy. And so, what happened is he didn't realize he was close to the canyon. The wing of the plane clipped the side of the canyon and, of course, started to spiral out of control and then crash in the canyon with the 29 souls perishing upon impact. It is definitely one of the biggest things that has happened in that canyon. And so people are like, what the heck? Like, what? Like, this is weird. Why did that happen in this canyon? This spooky canyon that has had so many like things happen in it. And I believe to this day they're still finding pieces of Flight 416. And you can actually see pieces of the aircraft in the Whittier Museum, which, side note, if you want to go on a really cool ghost tour of the museum, definitely look up Whittier Ghost Tours. They are so awesome and I love them. They're so much fun to go into, and they do a flashlight ghost tour of the Whittier Museum, and you learn a lot about the hauntings in Whittier, California. They're like, ooh, and they also have a walking tour, so it's really cool to also hear that. Back to my story. So that was Flight 416. Now, in recent history, there is a lot of dark unalivings that occur within the canyon. One of them was Gloria Gazziola, and her story is that her and her friends, her and three boys, went up to the canyon one night, and the three boys shot and unalived her in the canyon. Now, their original plan was to leave her in the canyon for someone to find later, or to maybe just hide her body. But what they didn't realize was that when they were trying to dispose of her body, her foot got caught in the seatbelt of the car, and the seatbelt was like, it got caught in the door. So when they left, they were actually dragging her body for 4 miles. And then after those 4 miles, her body let go, and it was left in closer to civilization and not in the canyon. And police found her body, and so they were like, what the heck, what's going on? And this was like in 2007, 2008. They're like, what the heck, what's happening? And so the three suspects were later identified and named. So it was Abraham Acuna, Matthew Garcia, and then what was the last boy's name? I know his last name was Monge. But the reason why they said that they unalived her was that they thought that she was going to snitch on them because they had previously robbed someplace. And they were like, nah, she's going to snitch on us. And so they thought that they would get to her before she would be able to snitch on them. Then, about a year later, a woman was found with multiple stab wounds. And then I believe in 2011, was a woman found in the ravine in Turnbull Canyon with parts of her body missing. To this day, they have not been able to identify who this woman is because the parts that they would be able to use are missing. So Turnbull Canyon definitely has a lot of interesting stories and history that is very dark. And with that history comes a lot of hauntings. I'm going to talk now about the paranormal hauntings that people claim that they see or that they hear when they're in the canyon. And one of those is definitely related to Flight 416. So a lot of the times people will say that they can hear different sounds going off, like maybe the plane hitting the canyon and they see billowing smoke, or they hear or see strange lights. And a lot of this can definitely be due to the residual hauntings. So the fact that it was such a traumatic event. If you know anything about the stone tape theory, it states that like whatever happens in a place, if it's so traumatic, the stones or the rock or the sediment of that place can actually record these instances like a video recording or like a sound recording and replay those moments. I believe that that is what happens here, is that because the plane crash was so traumatic, it is recorded in the sediment, it is recorded in the canyon itself. That can be the explanation as to why people hear the sounds of planes crashing or the billowing of smoke, because it's recorded. A lot of people also say that they can hear the sounds of drums, and this could be the sounds of indigenous peoples that were unalived in the canyon, kind of giving them a warning like, hey, do not come into this place, leave, get out. There have also been reports of ghost children, and this comes from the fact that there is a place called Hell's Gates. There is just a set of gates that no one knows what it goes to, no one knows why it's there. People don't know what's beyond the gates because it is locked up and no one can go, and it says no trespassing. So people have guessed that maybe it was an orphanage, or maybe it was an asylum. So people are not sure. But people claim that because there was a fire at an orphanage in Whittier, that the children haunt the canyon. And so maybe that kind of ties in with the gate, and maybe that what's beyond that gate was an orphanage, and maybe it did set on fire. But again, there is no clear evidence of what is beyond those gates. What they say is that they'll see handprints on their car windows, they'll hear giggling, they'll hear like children's voices, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Oh my god. There is nothing scarier than ghost children. I don't mess with ghost children. Ghost children? Woo! Sorry, I'm creeping out for a little bit. People also say that where Hell's Gates is actually where a lot of satanic rituals would take place, and that they would see people go there, gather, and start satanic rituals, commit sacrifices, which is why there's so many like deaths or disappearances that happen within Turnbull Canyon. There is also rumors that a certain group of people with white clothing have been known to frequent Turnbull Canyon. So were they also doing satanic rituals? I don't know. Again, this is all speculation. A lot of it is just rumors. There's no recorded evidence to be for sure about what it is, but these are the rumors that come out. Another thing is this hanging tree. Now, people say that a man unalived himself from this tree, and that people can still see a shadowy figure from the tree. Now, it would also make sense with the people that if there was a hanging tree, that would make a lot of sense, because that would, that haunting would make a lot of sense in terms of just the traumatic experience of lynchings, especially with the history of lynchings in the United States. That is a lot of the paranormal hauntings that people state that happens within Turnbull Canyon. And a lot of people will not step into the canyon late at night. I personally have never been into the canyon because a lot of the times I just have never needed to go in there. I don't want to go in there at night. I don't have a death wish. And also, I'm very sensitive to a lot of those things. So I feel that a place that has had that much death and darkness occur within its space can be very overwhelming. I know my friend Alexis, her mother had been there a lot because they grew up there a lot. And I know she's been through it. And she's like, no, and she's even more sensitive than I am. And she's like, nope, nope, I cannot go through Turnbull Canyon. Like, I will never step in that place ever again. Because I think she had to go through it. She had to drive through it once in the dark. And she was like, no, heck no. And because, again, people report like car lights going behind them, getting really close to them. They report people in 50s clothing. So maybe it could be the passengers from Flight 416. We'll never know. So is Turnbull Canyon truly cursed? Or is it just a place that holds a lot of history with violence, death, and darkness? Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there is no doubt that Turnbull Canyon definitely has a dark presence within it because of its dark history and because of the many disappearances that occur there, the unalivings, and it is just a place that many people are scared to go into. If you enjoyed this video today, please make sure to give a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. We are going to be doing a Final Queer File every 2 weeks. Our next Final Queer File, we are headed to Fall River, Massachusetts, where we are going to dive into the file of Lizzie Borden, the axe murderer of Fall River. This has been the Final Queer Files, and remember, the past isn't dead, it's just hiding in the dark.